the face of life-changing events, we often seek new paths and opportunities for happiness. Encounters, disappointments, challenges, and changes all become part of our journey. Jim Fox was astonished by how quickly life could take an unexpected turn. That morning, he woke up feeling terrible. A restless night had left him tired and unsure of how to tell his daughter, Emily, what he had witnessed the day before. While at the mall, he had seen Emily's boyfriend passionately kissing one of her so-called girlfriends. This wasn't just an innocent moment of misunderstanding. They were clearly making out. Jim knew his daughter well enough to predict how devastated she would feel upon hearing this news. Although Jim never hesitated to tell Emily the truth, he was troubled about when and how to break the news. Emily's volleyball team was due to compete in a district semifinal match in a few hours, and she needed to stay focused to perform her best. Jim decided to hold off on telling her until after the game, planning to break the bad news gently on the drive home. Later that afternoon, another significant moment weighed on Jim's mind, his meeting with his supervisor. Summoned to the office, Jim found himself introduced to an older, heavy-set man named Ralph Jenkins. Keeping a polite and composed demeanor, Jim shook Ralph's hand and waited silently for his boss to explain the purpose of the meeting. Jim, we've recently finalized the purchase of precise buffers in Daytona Beach, his boss began. This is Ralph, the former owner. We're set to begin operations at the start of the new year, and I want you to oversee our maintenance team there. Jim listened attentively as his boss continued. I understand you've been frustrated by the lack of advancement opportunities here, but we've decided to promote you. You'll be working with Ralph from Thanksgiving through the end of the year to get up to speed. Ralph will introduce you to the team and help you settle in. Given your in-depth familiarity with our equipment, I'm confident you'll find this transition smooth. Then came the critical question. I need to know if you're ready to relocate to Daytona Beach, his boss said. The sale of the factory includes a 2-bedroom flat that Ralph's company owned. You can move your family there immediately and stay rent-free for a year. By that time, you'll have a better sense of whether this position is the right fit for you. If you decide to stay, you can make arrangements to buy a home in Daytona. Before you answer, let me make one thing clear. The boss continued, this position will come with a 25% wage increase. How long will it take for you to decide? Agree, Jim responded promptly. My wife has been complaining about Pennsylvania winters for years. Her biggest fear was that I'd be transferred to a plant in Michigan. She'll be thrilled when I tell her about the pay bump and Daytona Beach. She can easily transfer her workload to a nearby Home Depot. I'll gladly accept this position. Then it's settled, the boss replied. Why don't you use my business car to drive Ralph back to the airport and then take the rest of the day off? Jim grinned to himself as he dropped Ralph off and drove away from the airport. For the first time in a while, everything seemed to be falling into place. Emily could relocate to Daytona for her final semester of high school and put her loser boyfriend behind her. Finally, things are looking up, he thought. But then life threw another curveball. Helen, Jim's wife, drove a crimson Camry, one of millions on the road. Except her car had a distinguishing mark. A child driver had backed into it at her workplace the week prior, damaging the front grille. The plastic had mostly fallen off, leaving a few bent pieces of metal, and the radiator was now clearly visible. As Jim drove past a Best Western motel just a few blocks from the airport, he spotted a red Camry with a visible radiator. His heart began to race. Pulling into an empty space at the far end of the lot, he parked beside the Camry to evaluate the situation. Jim was not a violent man, but if Helen didn't have a good reason for parking her car at the motel, things could escalate. Slowly, he calmed himself. She doesn't know I'm driving this company car. It has tinted windows, darker than what's probably legal in this state. Jim decided to wait and see who was with her. After a few minutes, though, sitting there felt inadequate. Then he came up with a simple idea. Helen's spare tire was still at home in the garage, where he'd left it after repairing it a few days earlier. If Helen had a flat tire, she'd have no choice but to call him for help. Acting furtively, Jim slid out of the car, opened his jackknife, and punctured the valve stem on the left rear tire of Helen's car. Within moments, the tire was flat. He quickly returned to the back seat of the company car, slouched down, and waited. About half an hour later, Jim heard a string of profanity at the car window. He lowered it slightly, just enough to hear. "Damn it! What do I do now?" Helen exclaimed. "No problem, sexy lady," a man's voice replied smoothly. "After a meal like the one we just had, I'll be happy to help you out." Jim's heart sank. His life was crumbling before his eyes. "I don't have a spare tire," Helen said angrily. "My husband didn't reinstall the wheel in the car after he repaired it. It's sitting in the garage at home." The man chuckled. "Well, I always make sure my wife's car is in perfect shape. I wouldn't want her stranded with the kids. I regret coming with you instead of handling this myself." "What do we do now?" Helen asked. "Let's head back to our room and warm up while I make a call," the man suggested. As the couple walked back into the motel, Jim slumped in his seat, waiting for the phone to ring. What will I say when she calls, especially if she tells me to bring the spare tire to a motel near the airport? But the call never came. 20 minutes later, Jim spotted a familiar Honda Civic pulling into the parking lot. His stomach sank further. It was his daughter, Emily. She parked on the opposite side of the lot and got out, walking toward the motel. Jim watched in disbelief as Emily knocked on the door. After a minute, Helen opened it. Jim couldn't hear their conversation, but Emily soon turned, walked back to her car, and popped open the trunk. She retrieved the spare tire and set it on the sidewalk. Helen and her lover emerged, walking toward Emily. "Frank, please carry this for Emily," Helen said hurriedly. "She has to play tonight and can't afford to get hurt or exhausted before the match." "Thanks for your care, Mom," Emily replied sharply. "But if you were really thinking about me, you might have put on some clothes before I arrived." Helen flushed, clearly embarrassed. Emily continued, "I need to get to school and get ready for the match. Can you handle it from here?" "Of course, no problem," Frank said, smirking. "As soon as I get in the car, your mom will drop me off at Home Depot where my car's parked. I'll make it in time to watch your game tonight. I'll be pulling for you." "Thanks," Emily muttered before driving off, clearly upset. Jim sat frozen in his seat, unable to process what he had just witnessed. "Frank, please don't sit too close to Mom," Emily said firmly. "Dad will be there, and I don't want any drama while I'm playing." "Don't worry, I won't provoke your father," Frank chuckled. "I doubt he even understands what's going on, and even if he did, he wouldn't question me. He knows it wouldn't do him any good." "Frank," Helen interjected sharply, "I asked you not to talk about Jim like that. He's my husband and Emily's father. He's a wonderful man who deserves respect." Emily turned to her mom, her tone incredulous. "Respect? In what world? Mom, do you think this," she gestured toward Frank, "is respectful to Dad? I just want to finish school before you two blow up our family with a divorce." "There will be no divorce," Helen said firmly. "I told you I love your father. We'll die in each other's arms." Emily sighed in frustration. "Mom, you're delusional. Dad isn't going to let you keep having boyfriends forever. Eventually, he's going to catch you." "It's not like that," Helen insisted. "Frank and I are just friends with benefits. This won't last long. We're just enjoying it while we can. I deserve some fun after all the time and effort I've put into my marriage." Dad has put in just as much effort, probably more. Emily shot back. Your father? Please. Helen laughed dismissively. He's not the type. You know how shy he is around women. Took him weeks to even ask me out. He's not like Frank. Emily's eyes narrowed as she pointed toward Frank. No, Dad's not like Frank. Dad is a good father and a faithful husband. Frank, on the other hand, is cheating on his wife. If he cared about his wife and kids, he wouldn't be sneaking around with a married woman at a cheap motel. Helen's tone turned sharp. That's enough. I'm not in the mood to argue with you about this. You need to get to school and prepare for your match. Frank and I will be there to cheer you on. Emily's expression was cold. For whatever reason, that doesn't make me feel very warm and cozy. Keep him away from Dad, Mom. Frank might think Dad's clueless, but if he pushes Dad, I guarantee Dad will kick his ass. Without waiting for a reply, Emily got into her Honda and drove away, leaving Helen and Frank alone in the parking lot. She's not happy for us, is she? Frank asked as he tightened the lug nuts on Helen's wheel.
Helen sighed.
No, and honestly, I wouldn't expect her to be. If the roles were reversed, I doubt your kids would be thrilled either. That's why I'm careful not to let them know, Frank replied. I didn't even realize Emily was there the day I brought you home. She was supposed to be at school. Now that she knows, she's keeping quiet to protect your marriage. She doesn't want it to end. Helen gave a small, tired smile. I guess she doesn't. Meanwhile, Jim sat disoriented in the back seat of the business car, long after Helen and Frank drove away. Learning that Helen was cheating on him was devastating enough, but realizing his daughter knew and tolerated the situation made it even worse. Eventually, he snapped out of his stupor, glancing at the clock. Emily's volleyball match was starting soon. Jim had never missed one of her games throughout her high school career. He wasn't going to start now. He returned to the parking lot, retrieved his truck, and headed home. But when he arrived, he found he had no appetite and no desire to sit at the kitchen table with his wife and daughter. He grabbed a few beers, retreated to the garage, and began thinking about his next steps. It struck him how absurd life could be, feeling on top of the world one moment, only to have everything collapse the next. Jim suspected Helen wouldn't want to relocate to Daytona now that she had a lover. The more he thought about it, the more unpleasant the entire situation seemed. He had been faithful, worked hard to support his family, and assumed Helen appreciated their marriage. Clearly, he had been wrong. Looking back, Jim realized Helen's unusually amorous behavior since Labor Day hadn't been a sign of rekindled passion. It was a tactic to keep him content and unsuspecting, and it had worked perfectly. Helen didn't know that Jim's company had purchased a factory in Florida. If she did, she would likely assume the transfer was to Michigan, her worst fear. She would never imagine moving to Florida, especially over Thanksgiving. Jim began to form a plan. He could relocate to Daytona on his own, move into the company-provided apartment, and take time to sort out his family issues from a distance. Helen could carry on with Frank if she wanted. It would no longer concern him. Emily could stay in Pennsylvania to finish school while he enjoyed the sunshine and surf of Florida. The more he thought about it, the more appealing the plan became. It wasn't much of a revenge, but it was a start. He had the weekend and the coming week to prepare for the move. Shortly after Thanksgiving, he'd head to Daytona. Helen and Emily, thinking he was bound for Michigan, wouldn't even try to stop him. For the first time that day, Jim felt a flicker of relief. He had a plan, a way to escape the chaos that had overtaken his life. And most importantly, he wouldn't have to see Helen and Frank together, or face the disappointment in Emily's eyes anytime soon. Jim grabbed another beer, knowing from experience that it would take nothing short of a bomb to wake him before daylight. He walked to the master bedroom, gathered the clothes he needed for the next morning, and brought them to the spare bedroom. He added a razor and some toiletries to the second bathroom, then shut the door to the guest room and climbed into bed. He worried for almost 10 minutes before exhaustion finally took over. At home, Emily noticed her father's pickup truck sitting in the garage. "I wonder why he didn't come to my match. I hope he's not sick," she said aloud. Helen stepped ahead of Emily into the kitchen and noticed the empty beer cans scattered on the table. "This isn't like Jim," she muttered. "I hope he's okay. I'll go check on him." Helen went to the master bedroom but was surprised to find it empty. She returned to the kitchen, puzzled. "He's not in bed," she told Emily. "He's not in the garage and he's not watching TV. Where do you think he is?" "There aren't many options," Emily replied. "We can check the basement and laundry room, though I don't think Dad even knows where those are, and then my room and the guest bedroom." Finally, the two women discovered Jim fast asleep in the guest room. Despite their attempts to wake him, he remained motionless, gripping his pillow tightly and breathing heavily. "I think he's been drinking," Emily suggested. "I've never seen him drink heavily before, but he sure looks like it now. I wonder why he missed my match, and why he's drinking." "Let's ask him in the morning," Helen replied, quietly closing the door. "Maybe he's not feeling well. Sometimes he sleeps in here to avoid passing on a bug. He's going to feel terrible in the morning, so don't make him feel any worse for missing the game." Helen added, "Frank thinks you played really well. He believes you could earn a scholarship. Why is it so hard for you to understand why I can't stand Frank?" Emily shot back irritably. "In my opinion, he's a cheating jerk, and if I never see him again, it'll be too soon." "You shouldn't think like that," Helen scolded. "Why can't you just be happy for me? I like him. He makes me feel youthful and attractive again." "It's probably because I'm too worried about Dad," Emily retorted. "I don't think he could handle knowing about Frank. It would break his heart." "That's exactly why he can't find out," Helen said dismissively. "I give him all the love he needs. Frank just gives me something more than your father can." "Keep telling yourself that, Mom," Emily said sharply. "I doubt Dad would agree, and if you keep this up, he'll figure it out. Not from me, though. If you don't tell him, he'll never suspect anything," Helen replied confidently. "I know your father. He trusts me completely." Emily said nothing and turned to head to her bedroom. Jim's eyes opened at 5 a.m. He had slept restlessly but now felt wide awake. He dressed quietly, left the house discreetly, and headed to IHOP for breakfast. Midway through his meal, his phone rang. It was Helen. "Jim, are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. "You didn't come to Emily's match last night. Are you sick? And why did you sleep in the guest room and leave early this morning? This isn't like you." Jim took a deep breath. "I just decided to be more unpredictable and act on the spur of the moment," he replied curtly before hanging up and shutting off his phone. Jim spent the rest of the morning at the facility, ensuring that his tools and belongings were packed into his pickup truck. He needed everything ready for his new life in Florida. As the hours passed, he felt increasingly confident in his decision. While he couldn't undo the past, he could take control of his future. Moving to a new location offered him the chance to start fresh, meet new people, and enjoy better weather. He was resolved to keep his plans a secret for the next 3 days. Thanksgiving was approaching, and by the time Helen and Emily realized he wasn't going to Michigan, he'd already be in Florida. Late that afternoon, Jim returned home. He headed to the restroom to wash his hands but was startled when Helen appeared, glaring at him. "Never hang up on me," she snapped. "You missed Emily's big match last night, which they won, And now you're sneaking around, drinking, passing out in the guest room, and avoiding me. Then you hang up when I call out of concern. Am I supposed to make dinner for you now, too? Honestly, I hope you starve. 2 days ago, Jim might have felt guilty and apologized to Helen. But now her anger felt meaningless. He realized that her happiness, or lack thereof, didn't matter to him anymore. What difference does it make if she's happy or not? He thought. Without a word, he nodded and walked out the door. 10 minutes later, Jim was at a nearby sports pub, ordering ribs and sipping a cold beer. As he chatted with the other patrons about the latest football game, he was surprised to find himself smiling. Maybe life could still be enjoyable after all, he thought, taking another sip. Jim arrived home around 11 p.m. Helen and Emily were sitting in the living room, watching an old film. So, you've decided to grace us with your presence? Helen asked cynically. Don't expect to sleep in my bed until you apologize to Emily and me for acting like an idiot. Okay, was all Jim muttered as he walked past the living room and into the bedroom. He hastily gathered his clothes for the next day and carried them to the guest room. There, he swiftly undressed and slipped into bed, not seeming at all concerned about his unhappiness. When Jim was out of sight, Emily spoke. He acts like he enjoys sleeping in the guest room. You don't know your father, Helen said with a small grin. He won't last more than 2 nights before crawling back into bed with me. He knows when he's feeling good. Probably, Emily said skeptically. I just hope he doesn't find out how good Frank is. Please stop discussing his name, Helen snapped. I want to keep this a secret, so drop it. I guess that's your responsibility then, Emily replied sarcastically. Helen looked at her daughter, hoping to embarrass her into silence. When Emily first saw her with Frank, Helen thought it might make things easier, one fewer person to lie to. But over time, Emily became more disrespectful. She had agreed to keep Frank a secret to avoid her parents splitting up, but the knowledge weighed heavily on her. Helen found it increasingly difficult to balance being a good mother and a secret lover, especially with Emily aware of her double life. Jim's behavior only added to Helen's frustration. She couldn't recall any recent quarrels or moments of scorn between them, but his mood over the last 2 days had been downright terrible. She was determined not to tolerate it for long. He'll come to his senses, she reassured herself. The sex we have is too amazing for him to miss for long. He won't hold out. On Sunday morning, Jim woke up early again. He went to IHOP for breakfast and then took a long walk in the park. It was a cool, calm November morning, and he enjoyed the crisp air on his face, especially knowing he wouldn't have to endure the cold much longer after relocating to Florida. He returned home shortly before noon with a 6-pack of beer. He turned on the television, opened a bottle, and settled in to watch the pregame coverage while waiting for the Eagles game to start. Helen ignored him at first, but after an hour, she stomped into the garage, started her car, and drove off. When Helen returned around 6:30, Jim noticed there was no sign of dinner. By 7 o'clock, the game was over, and Jim, still hungry, turned off the television and left the house again. 20 minutes later, he was back at the sports pub, eating ribs and watching the late football game. The Eagles had defeated the Giants, and Jim spent the evening in a good mood, looking forward to their Thanksgiving Day game against the Cowboys. Back at home, Emily sat with Helen in the living room, the TV on but her mind elsewhere. Dad's been acting strange lately, don't you think? She asked. He usually watches the game on Sundays. Did you two have a fight? Not really, Helen replied with a shrug. We barely spoke. I told him he needed to apologize to you for missing your match and for drinking too much before he could come back to my bed. I also told him I wouldn't cook for him unless his attitude changed. He'll miss my cooking soon enough, and he'll apologize when he does. Emily didn't reply. By halftime, the late football game had turned into a blowout, and Jim left the bar. When he got home, Helen and Emily were still watching their movie. He walked past them without a word and went straight to the guest room. Closing the door, he undressed and crawled under the covers. For the next 3 days, Jim remained silent and distant, showing no intention of apologizing. Helen was unsettled by his defiance. She had never seen him act this way before. On Tuesday afternoon, Helen met Frank again. While at the motel, her car suffered yet another flat tire. This time, Helen felt uneasy. 2 flat tires in such a short time couldn't be a coincidence. She resolved never to visit that motel again. Luckily, she had taken the time to repair the spare tire on Monday, and Frank replaced it for her once more. While Helen dealt with her car, Jim spent Monday and Tuesday preparing for his move. He carefully packed the clothes he planned to take to Florida, along with all his personal items and tools, and loaded them into his truck. He arranged the remaining garments in the closet to make it look full, wondering if Helen would notice that he hadn't packed any cold weather gear. On Monday and Tuesday afternoons, Jim parked his truck at Home Depot and waited for Helen to leave the house. Helen left at her usual time the next day and headed to a nearby grocery store. Jim followed her discreetly, waiting until he was sure she was on her way home before parking at his favorite bar to grab dinner and watch Monday Night Football. At home, Emily sat at the dining table with her mother. "Is Dad not coming home tonight?" she asked. "Who knows?" Helen replied with a shrug. "He's not speaking to me and is still sleeping in the guest room. I have no idea what's gotten into him. Do you think he found out about you?" Emily asked cautiously. "You told him he couldn't sleep with you and refused to cook for him. Why would he come home? Maybe you should just forgive him and make him a nice dinner tomorrow night." "I can't," Helen said matter-of-factly. "I'm meeting Frank tomorrow, so you'll have to eat leftovers. I'll be home later." "So much for giving Frank what Dad supposedly can't," Emily said, irritation in her voice. "You skip dinner, ignore Dad like he's worthless, and rush off to satisfy Frank. Seems like Frank has the upper hand here." "At least Frank isn't acting like an ass," Helen snapped defensively. "He treats me with respect. He doesn't get drunk, hang up on me, or avoid talking." Emily gave her mother a pointed look. "Does he take out the garbage, mow the lawn, fix the house, or pay our mortgage?" Helen paused. "Of course not. What are you trying to say?" "Frank doesn't have to do anything but get into bed with you," Emily replied coldly. "Dad does all of that and more. Frank has sex with you, and suddenly he's the best man in the world? You don't expect him to help with anything else. He doesn't have to join you at family events or sit in a hospital waiting room if you get hurt. But you hold Dad to impossibly high standards and still deny him what you gladly give to Frank, who's done nothing to deserve it beyond telling you that you're attractive." Helen's face flushed with anger. "I'm your mother, and I expect you to respect me. Respect is earned, not demanded," Emily shot back. That evening, Emily caught her father as he was heading upstairs. "Our district championship game is tomorrow at the state gym. It starts at 4 o'clock. Do you think you'll come?" "I'll check my schedule," Jim responded vaguely before continuing to his room. Emily frowned. "I think he's mad at me too," she told Helen. "I haven't done anything to upset him, but he doesn't seem to care about anything I say. He's just in a strange mood," Helen said in an attempt to comfort her. "He's upset about something but doesn't know how to express it. Don't worry, he'll come to the game tomorrow." Emily glanced toward the garage. "His truck is still here. Do you think he'll actually show up this time?"
Helen sighed.
"I don't know." The following evening, Emily was disappointed to see no sign of her father at her game. "He just didn't want to come," she said sadly when she got home. "Why is he so upset with me?" "That's a fair question," Helen admitted. "Let's find out what's going on." The two women headed to the kitchen, where they found yet another empty six-pack on the counter. Once again, Jim was nowhere to be seen. "It's only 8 o'clock, Helen muttered. "He can't possibly be in bed already." But when they checked the guest room, they found Jim fast asleep, completely unresponsive to their attempts to wake him. Frustrated, both women retreated to the living room. "Tomorrow is Thanksgiving," Emily said. "Will you let Dad eat with us?" "Of course," Helen replied. "His parents will be here and so will mine. This is his home. I'd never try to keep him away." "Who else did you invite?" Emily asked warily. "Please don't tell me it's Frank." Helen hesitated before answering. "Frank and his wife are coming. I think he and Jim will get along well. They both like football and hunting. They have a lot in common." Emily stared at her mother in disbelief. "The problem is, one of the things they share is you. Most spouses don't want to share their partner with their hunting buddies or football pals. You're setting yourself up for disaster, Mom." "I just think they'll get along," Helen insisted. "Jim needs more friends, and Frank could help him with that." Emily shook her head. "You've lost your mind. There's no way those two in the same room could end well." "We'll see," Helen said confidently. "I think you'll be surprised." Jim woke up early on Thanksgiving morning and went to a small cafe that was open until noon for a leisurely breakfast. When he returned home around 9 a.m., the house was filled with the aromas of turkey, potatoes, gravy, pies, and other festive dishes. "We'll sit down for dinner at noon," Helen announced as she bustled around the kitchen. "Our parents will be here shortly. Would you like something to drink?" Jim shook his head, walked into the living room, and turned on the television. He knew Helen was trying to extend an olive branch, but he was no longer interested in her gestures. He greeted her politely when necessary but avoided engaging further. Both sets of parents arrived pleasantly, greeting Jim with their usual kindness. They had always treated him well. A few minutes later, Jim's parents joined the gathering. As the family began passing food around the table, Jim cleared his throat. "I have an announcement to make," he said. The table grew quiet as Jim continued. "I've been transferred to another plant within the company. I'll be leaving tomorrow morning. The project will last at least until spring, possibly longer." Helen froze, stunned by the sudden revelation. Why hadn't he mentioned this earlier? She wondered. The thought of moving so quickly overwhelmed her. Could I even relocate to Michigan? Is this why Jim has been acting so strangely? "This is quite unexpected," Helen's mother remarked. "Helen never mentioned it. Will she join you? Or are you waiting to see how serious the situation is?" "I'll go alone," Jim responded. It wouldn't be fair to uproot Emily during the school year or expect Helen to leave her job. I'll just have to manage by myself for a few months. Both sets of grandparents began discussing Michigan's notoriously cold winters. Helen and Emily exchanged glances, each thinking the same thing. Jim is upset about leaving his family and moving to such a frigid place. No wonder he's been in a bad mood. After dinner, Jim joined his father and Helen's father in front of the television to watch the second half of the Eagles game. Unfortunately, the Cowboys had a 17-point lead at halftime, and things only got worse from there. All three men were disgusted by the lack of effort from their team. As they sat through the pregame coverage for the next football match, the doorbell rang. Jim paid little attention until Helen's voice came from the hallway. "Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce you to a couple of friends. This is Nancy and her husband, Frank," she announced. Helen then introduced everyone in the room. Jim was the last. Frank stepped forward, grinning like the Cheshire Cat. He wore a Dallas Cowboys sweater with Romo printed in bold letters across the back. His smile widened as he extended a hand to Jim. "Hello, Jimmy. I've heard a lot about you," Frank said smugly. Jim stood, maintaining a neutral expression, but internally he felt his restraint slipping. Frank's entire demeanor was taunting, from the sweater mocking Jim's favorite team to his brazen attitude in Jim's home. Without warning, Jim snapped. He kicked Frank hard between the legs, sending him crumpling to the ground. As Frank bent over, clutching his groin, Jim delivered a punch to his face with a sickening crack. Blood poured from Frank's nose as he fell into a fetal position on the floor. For a moment, no one moved. Then Nancy screamed and dropped to the floor beside her husband. Helen rushed to the bathroom, vomiting into the toilet, while Emily scrambled to get ice and a washcloth. She handed them to Nancy, who pressed the cloth gently against Frank's face. Jim stood frozen, as stunned as everyone else by his actions. Overwhelmed by the disapproval in the room, he grabbed his coat and walked out the door without a word. Jim drove through the night, finally exiting Highway 81 and pulling onto Highway 76 in Virginia. In Hillsville, he rented a motel room and fell asleep within minutes. When he woke the next morning, he turned on his phone to find the mailbox full. No surprise. He listened to several messages before deleting them all. Helen, Emily, and his mother had called repeatedly, demanding to know where he was and what he thought he was doing. Jim decided to stick to his schedule. He drove south on Highway 77, replaying the previous day's events in his mind. That idiot Frank deserved it, he thought bitterly. But what will the consequences be? He worried about the highway patrol stopping him or losing his job before he even reached Daytona. Will Helen divorce me now? He reluctantly decided to check his messages to understand the situation better. Leaving his phone on but refusing to answer calls, he waited for callers to hang up before checking their messages. Within 30 minutes, Helen called again. He waited for her to finish and then read her text message. "Jim, call me. I understand the transfer has upset you deeply, but you need to pull yourself together. Frank will be fine, he just needs surgery for his nose. He's not pressing charges. Please, let's talk." Jim drove the entire morning and afternoon, arriving at the apartment in Daytona at 5 p.m. The email he'd received a few days earlier included the code for a lockbox attached to the outdoor faucet. He retrieved the front door key and let himself in. By the time he unpacked his clothes and personal items, it was well past 7 o'clock. He parked his truck in the garage, made the bed, and collapsed into it. With 2 days off before his new job started, Jim had time to settle in. On Friday evening, while exploring the apartment, he noticed a few minor issues that needed fixing. Saturday morning, Jim decided it would be a good day to improve the condition of his apartment. However, he became increasingly worried that Helen might call his workplace, find out about the relocation to Florida, and decide to join him, something he desperately wanted to avoid. He resolved to call her first. "Hello," Helen answered, her voice sharp. "Hi, Helen. It's Jim. Where the hell are you? We called you all night and your phone was off. What is wrong with you?" Frank has a cracked nose and a minor concussion, all because he rooted for a different football team. "Are you insane?" Jim didn't reply. He simply ended the call, turned off his phone, and began writing a list of supplies he needed from the store. An hour later, he returned to the apartment with a new front door lock, an air conditioner filter, cleaning supplies, and a 30-pack of beer. Around midday, he decided to call Emily on her cell phone. "Hi, Dad." Emily answered brightly. "I'm so glad you called. After you finished, decorating Frank, An ambulance came and took him to the hospital. Both sets of grandparents were terrified you'd lost your mind, and Mom was scared they'd sue us. I had to wipe up the blood while Mom drove Nancy to the hospital. I think she apologized to her 100 times. Anything else interesting happen? Jim asked flatly. Not much. It was pretty quiet after that, Emily replied, then added, Oh, one more thing. Mom's mad because you hung up on her again. She says she was only warming up. Yes, I could tell, Jim admitted. That's why I called you instead. I wanted to let you know I've started a new job, and we begin work on Monday morning. Just in case anyone, like the police, asks where I am. Don't worry about that, Dad, Emily said reassuringly. Frank hasn't pressed charges, even though I think his wife wanted to. The cops won't come after you. But why all the secrecy about your transfer? Is that why you've been acting so strangely? Jim paused before answering. The day I found out about the transfer was significant for me. It made me think about where I am in life and where I need to go. I realized I can't be respected by others unless I respect myself first. That's why I've been reflecting so much. Emily's voice softened. Are you okay, Dad? Is there anything wrong with your health or something we should know? Not exactly, Jim said, his tone heavy with regret. You and your mother know my struggles. I'm certain of that. Just tell your mom I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Okay? Okay, Dad. I'll call you from time to time. Will you answer? Emily asked tentatively. Jim felt his temper flare but suppressed it. He loved Emily unconditionally, but her complicity in deceiving him was a bitter pill to swallow. Despite everything, he didn't want to lose her entirely. If you don't call while I'm at work, I'll answer, he said after a pause. What about Mom? Can she call you? Emily pressed. If she wants to call me just to tell me what a jerk I am, she shouldn't bother, Jim replied curtly. But if there's an issue with the house or the family that I need to know about, she can call me. That's fair, isn't it? Emily sighed. I'll tell her. Good luck with the new job, Dad. Stay warm. It's better than I expected here. Don't worry about the weather. I'll be fine. Goodbye, Emily. After ending the call, Emily set her phone in her lap. Helen, who had been sitting nearby, immediately started asking questions. What did he say? Did he apologize? Is he scared to come home? What did he say about me? Emily looked at her mother evenly. He doesn't seem afraid of anything. He said no one would respect him unless he respected himself. That's why he let Frank down and keeps hanging up on you. If you want to talk to him, you'll have to be more respectful and considerate. Helen's expression darkened. He's the one who beat up a guest in our house just because he wore the wrong t-shirt. He's the one who keeps hanging up on me. The next time I talk to him, I'm going to tell him exactly what I think. That's precisely what he's talking about, Emily said. He won't listen. He'll just hang up. If you don't change your approach, Frank is the only person who'll benefit from you. Unless, of course, you find another boyfriend. Why do you keep making such rude and disparaging remarks? Helen snapped. Because you're rude, demeaning, and extremely disrespectful, Emily retorted sharply. Emily responded firmly. Frank wasn't just laughing about the Cowboys beating the Eagles. He was mocking Dad because he had slept with you. That's enough to drive anyone insane. But Jim doesn't know about Frank or me, Helen protested. There's no way he could tell Frank was hinting at anything. He knew, Emily countered. Frank was acting like a complete fool, and Dad could see it. When you visit someone's house, you don't mock or disrespect them. Any man would be enraged, even if he had no idea his wife was sleeping with the guy. Enough, Helen snapped. I won't listen to this kind of talk anymore. You live under my roof, and you will treat me with respect, whether you believe I deserve it or not. On Wednesday evening, Jim was relaxing by the pool when his phone rang. Seeing Helen's name, he ignored it and let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, he checked the message. "Jim," Helen's voice began calmly. "I know you're screening my calls. Please call me back. We need to make some decisions about the house. Who will shovel the driveway when it snows? Should we sign up for fuel oil delivery? And which company should we use? Please give me a call." Jim listened intently. Helen's tone was neutral, no accusations or hostility. Deciding the questions were important enough to warrant a reply, he called her back. He didn't want Helen or Emily to face safety or health issues this winter. "Thank you for calling, Jim," Helen said, her tone still calm. "I'm worried about the things you usually handle around the house, especially now that the snow has started. What should I do?" "I'll sit down and prepare a detailed list," Jim promised. "I'll email it to you." "I should have thought of that," Helen said, sounding relieved. After a pause, she added, "Are you coming home for Christmas? Mom and Dad have invited us for Christmas dinner, and your parents want us over for Christmas Eve. They keep asking if I've spoken to you. It's awkward to tell them no, and they say you won't return their calls either." "I don't know what my schedule will be," Jim replied. "If it's possible, I'll be home. That's all you can tell them for now. You can also explain that I'll start answering their calls when they begin speaking to me politely. Every message I've gotten from them so far has been nasty or threatening, and I don't need that." Helen hesitated. "Okay, I'll tell them, but I doubt it'll do much good. They're still upset about how you treated Frank and how you disappeared afterward." "Then there's no reason for me to come home for Christmas," Jim said flatly. "I won't show up just to be treated like public enemy number one. If they want me there because they enjoy my company, that's different. Otherwise, I'm not interested." "You can still come home," Helen said, her voice trembling. "Emily and I would be happy to see you, and we'll avoid making dumb comments, if we can help it." Then, in a softer tone, she asked, "Don't you miss making love to me?" Jim paused, thrown by the sudden turn in the conversation. The thought of Helen and Frank together had obliterated any feelings of intimacy he once had for her. He carefully considered how to respond, knowing the truth wasn't an option. "I've always liked making love," Jim said cautiously. "Every time we were together, it was meaningful for me." He deliberately avoided mentioning that this sentiment had only applied before he discovered her infidelity. Helen began to cry softly. "You're the best lover I've ever had," she said. "I miss having you in my bed. Please come home for Christmas." "I'll see if I can make it work," Jim said noncommittally. "I'll need to see if I can get time off. Christmas week is tough, with so many people asking for vacation. I'll let you know." He shifted the conversation back to practical matters. "I'll send you an email with the contacts you'll need for winter preparations." Helen hung up with a small smile on her face, while Emily, having overheard the conversation, couldn't help but comment, "The best lover in the world, huh? I think it's best if Frank doesn't hear that," Emily said dryly. "He seems to think he's at the top of your list. And who knows whose lists you're on." "Enough about Frank," Helen said sharply. "Your father really is the best. That wasn't a lie. Frank might be more entertaining, but he's not better. When I explain it to him that way, he'll still hold on to it as good news. He'll be as proud as a peacock, thinking he's superior to my other boyfriends." Emily raised an eyebrow as Helen left the room, tears still streaming down her face. Meanwhile, Jim felt no regret about his distant attitude. If Helen was struggling with her choices, he thought, it was no less than she deserved. Jim quickly adapted to his new life in Florida. He made it a habit to swim every day. his tan deepening as he grew more comfortable in his new environment. His work at the plant was running smoothly. He had a solid understanding of the equipment and was confident in his ability to keep things operational. What surprised him most was the number of widows, divorcees, and single women living in his condominium complex. Without exception, they all seemed to relish his presence. Once word got out that he was handy with tools, he was constantly in demand. But Jim didn't mind. These women always found ways to thank him. They baked treats for him, prepared meals, or left bottles of wine or six-packs of beer at his door. Helen had been urging him to come home for the holidays. Just a few days before Christmas, Jim had finished repairing Mrs. Struthers' closet door when he turned around to see her standing by the bed, completely naked. "Jim, I want to thank you for your kindness," the middle-aged widow said with a smile. "I don't have much money, but I do have a lot of unfulfilled ambitions and needs. Will you help me with them?" Jim froze. He had never cheated on his wife, not even considered it. In fact, Helen was the only woman he had ever been with. But Susan Struthers was undeniably attractive. Her large, perky breasts and long legs made her a striking woman, and the temptation was real. "Susan," Jim began carefully, "I need to figure some things out in my marriage first. After Christmas, I'll have a better sense of where I stand. I've never cheated on my wife, but she might not even be my wife much longer. If that's the case, I'll ask if your offer is still on the table. If not, I'll try to reconcile with her. But I have to be honest, the odds of reconciliation don't look good right now." "I understand," Susan said, slipping her robe over her shoulders. "That stupid woman doesn't realize what a diamond she has in you. Does she? She cheated, didn't she?" Jim didn't respond. "Well, I'll be here," Susan continued. "The offer stands after the holidays. And just so you know, I'm not the only woman around here with unmet needs. All the ladies like you. You're a gentleman, courteous, helpful, and trustworthy. If you decide to end the marriage, there'll be no shortage of women eager to console you." Jim eventually called Helen to tell her he'd try to be home on Christmas Eve. He was taken aback by how happy she sounded on the phone. Despite everything, he missed Helen and Emily, and he felt he owed it to himself and his family to see if there was still a chance to make things work. With this in mind, he began his drive north 3 days before Christmas. On the first day, he drove halfway, leaving time to shop on the second day before arriving home in the evening. He even agreed to visit his parents for Christmas dinner, though he told himself he'd leave if things became too tense. At 9 a.m. on Christmas Eve, Jim turned onto his street. His mood shifted when he saw the driveway packed with cars. Recognizing a few of the vehicles, he realized Helen was hosting her usual informal holiday gathering with her coworkers from Home Depot. As Jim approached the front door, he glanced through the kitchen window and froze. There was Frank, laughing and chatting with the guests. Seeing him in Jim's home made his blood boil, and his festive spirit evaporated. Instead of confronting them, Jim decided to slip into the house quietly. He moved around to the back of the home, entering through the basement door. He settled onto an old sofa he'd brought there years ago and dozed off, hoping to wait out the party. Jim woke up about 2 hours later. The house was quiet now, and most of the cars were gone. Cautiously, he stepped outside and looked around. Only one vehicle remained in the driveway. Curious, he approached the house again and peeked into the kitchen window. His heart sank as he saw Helen with Frank. Frank leaned in, kissed her, and casually massaged her breast. A wave of anger surged through Jim, but he forced himself to remain calm. Storming in wouldn't end well, and he didn't want to risk escalating things further. Instead, Jim decided on another strategy. He would catch them in the act, take pictures as evidence, and tell Helen to go to hell before returning to Florida. Jim entered the house quietly and climbed the stairs undetected. He slipped into the guest room and waited. From his vantage point, he could see Helen heading upstairs to the master bedroom. About 20 minutes later, he heard the shower running and realized she was preparing herself for Frank. Jim stepped out into the hallway and turned off the bedside lamp in the master bedroom, plunging the upstairs into near darkness. He returned to the guest room to wait. When Frank began climbing the stairs, Jim reached out and switched off the hallway light. The second floor was now pitch black, with only dim light from the street filtering in through the windows. Frank muttered something under his breath as he continued up the stairs. Standing at the top, Jim could see his silhouette clearly. He stepped into the hallway and waited as Frank approached. Jim kicked Frank with his right foot when the man was only 3 steps from the top. He felt his heel connect with Frank's jaw, sending him tumbling backward. In the dim light, Jim watched as Frank slid down the stairs in a straight line, like a bobsledder. Frank hit the bottom step and continued into the center of the living room, propelled by inertia. For a moment, Frank didn't move. Jim could still hear the water running in the shower upstairs, and he realized Helen hadn't heard the commotion. As his rage began to subside, Jim's thoughts turned dark. If Frank dies, I'll be in serious trouble. Panicking, Jim rushed down the stairs, stepping over Frank's prone body, and left the house. He drove for hours, putting 100 miles between himself and the scene. By the time he pulled into a cheap motel, it was nearly dawn. He paid for the room in cash and collapsed for a few hours of rest before continuing south. As Jim drove, he reflected on what had happened. I assaulted a man again. This could turn into a very serious situation if Frank doesn't survive. He realized he needed to stay far away from Helen and Frank, or he might end up in prison for murder. They're simply not worth it. Still, he couldn't deny that being without Helen left him feeling lonely and adrift. Until recently, Helen and Emily had been the center of his world. Their betrayal left a deep wound, but he knew he needed to move on. Around noon, Jim's phone rang. He saw his parents' number and let it go to voicemail. He didn't have the courage to explain why he hadn't come for Christmas Eve dinner, or why he had attacked Frank again. Half an hour later, he forced himself to listen to the message. Hello, Jim. This is your father. Call us when you get this. Something has gone very wrong at your house. Helen and Emily are fine, but there's something important you need to know. Jim called his father immediately. Hi, Dad. I just got your message. What's happened? There was a long pause before his father responded. Son, there's no easy way to say this. That damn Frank was at your house again last night. It was late and he fell down the stairs. He's in the hospital with a broken jaw, a broken arm, several broken ribs, and another concussion. Jim said nothing, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. His wife found out he was at your house, his father continued. She thought he was working late inventory at Home Depot. When she got there and saw the paramedics loading him into the ambulance, she completely lost it. She probably slapped Helen and called her every name in the book. She even tried to throw Frank off the gurney, but the police stopped her. To say she was upset would be an understatement. Jim exhaled slowly, struggling to process the news. This takes us back to Thanksgiving, his father added. We were upset then because it seemed like you attacked Frank for no reason, just over a cowboy's shirt. But now, with a clearer picture of what's been going on, your mother and I owe you an apology. We should have known you wouldn't do something like that without good reason. We're proud of you, son. You showed more restraint than I would have. Thanks, Dad, Jim said quietly. How's Emily? Was she at home through all this? That's another problem, his father admitted. We had a serious conversation this morning. She wasn't home last night. She stayed at a friend's place. But today, She admitted she's known about Helen and Frank for a while. In her defense, she said she kept quiet because she wanted the family to stay together until she finished school. After that, she planned to tell you. Jim felt a heavy weight settle on his chest. Needless to say, we were very disappointed in her. His father continued. I can't imagine how you feel. Your mother told Emily she betrayed you just like Helen did. There were a lot of tears, but in the end we all hugged it out. She's young, Jim. She's still figuring things out. Thanks for helping her, Dad, Jim said sincerely. Son, where are you really? His father asked after a moment. I know you said you were transferred, but now that I understand the situation, I wonder if you just moved into a motel or stayed in town. Moving to Michigan in December seems pretty drastic. I didn't move to Michigan, Jim admitted. The company transferred me to Daytona Beach, Florida. They promoted me and gave me a nice raise plus a small apartment. I'm the maintenance supervisor now. In Florida? His father said, surprised. That's fantastic. Your mother and I have had enough of winter already. Would you mind if we visited you in February? Anytime, Dad. You're always welcome, Jim said. But please don't tell Helen where I am. I'm not ready to explain anything to her. I hear you, Jim, his father replied. And don't worry, it's unlikely she'll find out. Jim's father ended their call with one last piece of advice. Son, I'd encourage you to talk to Emily. She's feeling pretty down about all this chaos. She thinks you must have known about Helen's cheating because you were so cold to both of them. Did you know Emily was aware of it? Jim hesitated, his heart heavy. I need to go, Dad. We'll talk about all this later, once the dust settles. Thanks for your understanding and help. I love you both. After the call, Jim returned to his apartment as dusk fell on Christmas Eve. It was his first Christmas alone, and the loneliness weighed on him. He turned on the TV, cracked open a beer, and slumped onto the couch, lost in thought. As he sat there, the doorbell rang. When he opened the door, he found Susan Struthers standing there, a warm smile on her face. I saw your light on and thought I'd come wish you a Merry Christmas, she said. It's not good to be alone on Christmas, for either of us. The fact that you're here tells me you haven't made peace with your wife. That's a reasonable assumption, Jim agreed. Her boyfriend was planning to sleep in my bed. I hate crowds, unless of course it's a crowd of women, he added with a faint smile. What about just one woman? Susan teased. I might make you move a little, but I don't think you'll mind. Jim considered her offer for a moment before nodding. I'd really like that, he admitted. But I should warn you, I haven't been with anyone in a long time. I must not be very good at it. Otherwise, my wife wouldn't have gone looking for happiness elsewhere. I highly doubt that you're the problem, Susan said reassuringly. A man as gracious, selfless, and kind as you are in everyday life, you can bet he's great in the bedroom. Do you have condoms? Susan asked suddenly. No, Jim replied. I haven't used those in 20 years. Susan chuckled. You'll want to keep some handy. It's a healthy, thoughtful thing to do. Your partners will appreciate it. So it was, and Jim had a surprisingly great Christmas Eve. For the first time in months, his anger toward Helen and Emily began to fade. Replacing it were new, happy memories that lifted his self-esteem. The pain and void left by their betrayal were still there, but he felt like he was finally beginning to heal. Susan made sure Jim saw that life was still worth living. She left his apartment before dawn on Christmas morning to avoid gossip at the condominium, but promised to meet him at the heated pool later that day. That evening, after a home-cooked meal, Jim and Susan enjoyed another intimate night together. She returned to her apartment by 9 p.m., again aiming to avoid the prying eyes of the other residents. Still, Jim was sure that several curious neighbors had seen him enter and leave her apartment. Shortly after he got home, his phone rang. He saw it was Emily and answered. "Dad, you didn't come home for Christmas, but I don't blame you," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. "Mom's a mess, and I feel like crap too. I'm so sorry for what we did to you. I knew it was wrong, but I was selfish. I wanted you to stay together until I finished school." "It's all water under the bridge now," Jim replied, though his voice carried the weight of his pain. "I won't lie, you both hurt me deeply. I had no idea your mother was so unhappy with me, and it never occurred to me that you would agree to hide this from me. I'm trying to get through it, but it's not easy." Emily's voice softened. "Here's the strangest thing. Mom isn't unhappy with you. She told me you're a good husband, father, and lover. She just wanted to try something different, and now she regrets it. Did you know about Frank and your mom on Thanksgiving, when she invited him over?" Jim asked. "Yes," Emily admitted. "I should have apologized sooner. But when he was so smug about it, I was actually glad you, decorated him. I saw his stupid grin and realized he was gloating. Mom kept saying it was because of the Cowboys shirt, but I knew better." Jim sighed. "Is that why I missed your last 2 matches?" "Yes, and I'm sorry. When Frank said he'd be cheering for you, I knew I couldn't go. Otherwise, I'd be in jail right now." "Dad," Emily asked hesitantly, "did you hear Frank and Mom that day? When I brought the spare tire, you cut the valve stem, didn't you? Were you trying to get Mom to call you and confess?" Jim hesitated. "I wanted her to call me, yes, but not for that reason. I was hoping to figure things out. Instead, you got stuck in the middle. I'm sorry for that, Emily. I really was selfish and stupid, and now I'm paying for it." "Don't blame yourself," Jim said firmly. "I should have confronted your mother the moment I found out, but I have my own anger issues to deal with. If I'd tried to talk to her then, I might have sent them both to the hospital." Emily continued speaking to her father. "Mom got a letter from the state health department. While Frank was in the hospital, they ran some blood tests. Turns out he has a sexually transmitted infection. She's devastated and doesn't know what to do." Jim sighed deeply. "I don't know what to say, Emily. That's something your mom will have to deal with on her own. It's yet another consequence of her choices." Emily paused. "She's talking about how she doesn't even like Frank and how none of this would have happened if he hadn't fallen down the stairs. She's trying to shift the blame, but it's clear she knows she messed up. I don't think she's ready to accept how badly she hurt you." Jim's tone hardened. "She doesn't have to like Frank, Emily, but she chose him. She brought him into my home, lied to me, and disrespected me. That's on her, no one else. If she's dealing with consequences now, that's her burden to bear." Emily sighed. "I know, Dad. I told her the same thing, that she can't keep blaming others for her mistakes. But she keeps insisting she doesn't want a divorce. She's convinced herself she can fix everything. What should I tell her?" "You don't need to tell her anything," Jim replied. "She knows where I stand. I've made my decision, and nothing she says or does will change that. She needs to take responsibility for her actions, not make excuses or try to manipulate the situation." Emily's voice softened. "I get it, Dad. I just feel stuck in the middle sometimes. But I want you to know that I understand why you're doing this. You deserve better than what she's given you." "Thanks, sweetheart," Jim said, his voice warming. "I know this hasn't been easy for you either, but I appreciate your honesty. I just want you to be happy and live your best life. I love you, Dad, and I hope I can visit you soon. I think I need a break from all this." "You're always welcome here, Emily. Anytime. I'll make sure the spare bedroom is ready for you. Just let me know when you want to come," Jim assured her. Meanwhile, Helen was spiraling. She spent the next day in a haze of despair, replaying Emily's words over and over in her mind. Jim knows. He's known all along. And now I'm going to lose him forever. Emily tried to comfort her mother, but Helen was inconsolable. I don't need Frank, she sobbed. I don't even like him. I just want Jim to come back. I want my family back. Emily's patience wore thin. Mom, you can't just erase what happened. Dad gave you everything: love, trust, stability. You threw it all away. If you really wanted your family back, you wouldn't have cheated in the first place. Helen shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I made a mistake, but it doesn't mean I don't love your father. Emily's voice softened, though her frustration remained. Mom, love isn't enough when you betray someone like that. Dad's hurt, and he has every right to be. You need to face the fact that he may never come back. The days that followed were a whirlwind of pain and reflection for Helen. She couldn't sleep, haunted by memories of Jim's kindness and the life they had built together. She replayed every argument, every mistake, and every moment of Frank's smugness. The letter from the health department only deepened her shame. For Jim, Christmas marked a turning point. Though he still felt the sting of betrayal, he was beginning to find peace in his new life. Susan had helped him rediscover his worth, and Emily's support reminded him that he still had meaningful connections. He resolved to focus on the future, leaving the past behind where it belonged. Half the store employees, Emily continued, started whispering about Mom. She was mortified, Dad. She says she didn't even want Frank. She's so humiliated that she's avoiding everyone. I'm really worried about her. Jim sighed, his expression softening. I'm sorry to hear that, Emily, but your mom made choices that led to all of this. I didn't ask for any of it. She betrayed me, lied to me, and disrespected our family. I don't wish her harm, but forgiveness? That's a long road. Emily nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I understand, Dad. She's just, I don't know, falling apart without you. I know she's hurt you deeply, but I guess part of me hopes you might be able to find some peace with her someday. Jim reached across the table and took Emily's hand. Emily, I want peace too, but peace doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. I've moved on and I'm not looking back. I hope your mom finds a way to rebuild her life, but that's something she'll have to do without me. Emily wiped at her cheeks and nodded. I get it, Dad. I just wanted to say my piece. Jim smiled gently. And I appreciate that. You've always had a good heart, Emily. I can see you're growing into a wise and compassionate woman, even with everything that's happened. I'm proud of you. Emily managed a small smile. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. The next morning, Emily lounged by the pool, soaking up the warm Florida sun. She had stayed true to her word, enjoying her break without disrupting Jim's routine. When Jim returned home from work that evening, Emily greeted him with a bright smile. Dinner was great last night, she said. I loved meeting your coworkers. And you were right. They couldn't stop talking about how gorgeous I am, she teased, laughing. I told you, Jim replied with a chuckle. They'll be talking about it for weeks. As the days went by, Jim and Emily fell into an easy rhythm. They spent their evenings sharing stories, laughing, and rediscovering their bond. For Jim, having Emily there was a reminder of the love and trust they'd once shared, and it gave him hope for the future. On Emily's last night in Florida, she sat beside Jim on the couch, looking thoughtful. Dad, she began hesitantly, I know this probably doesn't mean much now, but I'm so grateful for you. After everything I did, helping Mom hide what she was doing, you still let me back into your life. That means more to me than I can say. Jim placed an arm around her shoulders and pulled her into a hug. Emily, I'll always be your dad. We all make mistakes and we all have regrets. What matters is that you've owned up to yours, and you're working to make things right. I'll never stop loving you. Emily hugged him tightly, her voice breaking. Thank you, Dad. I'll try to never let you down again. You won't, Jim said with certainty. And if you ever do, we'll deal with it together. The following morning, Jim drove Emily to meet her friends in Orlando. As they said their goodbyes, Emily promised to visit again soon. I'll be back for spring break next year if you'll have me, she said with a grin. You're always welcome, Emily, Jim replied, his heart lighter than it had been in months. I'll miss you, but I know you'll do great things. Take care of yourself. As Jim watched Emily drive away, he felt a profound sense of peace. For the first time in a long while, he was certain that, despite everything, his life was headed in the right direction. Emily continued, Mom's been dealing with a lot since everything happened. When rumors spread that Frank had a sexually transmitted disease, it came out that he'd contracted it from a newly hired cashier at the store. Turns out, he infected a significant number of people. Mom was the only manager on the list, and it was humiliating for her. She's come home in tears so many times, but to her credit, she's stuck it out. I think she's finally accepted that she made a huge mistake by cheating on you. Jim sighed deeply. Emily, your mother and I were supposed to be partners. Partners should be honest and trustworthy. I don't trust her anymore, and that's not something I can just get back. Emily nodded solemnly. I understand. It's especially clear to me now after meeting your neighbors at the pool today. It was awkward. So many women were asking me about you, and I'm pretty sure at least 4 of them are sleeping with you, she said with a smirk. Jim's cheeks reddened. Seriously? They talk about that? Oh yeah, Emily teased. They all think you're a sensitive, honest, attractive man, and apparently pretty good in bed. You've got quite the reputation, Dad. Jim chuckled and shook his head. I don't think it's as grand as you're making it sound. A few friends visit from time to time, that's all. I don't believe they think of me as anything special. It's more like, I'm available. Well, Emily replied, Mom made a huge mistake. That's obvious now. But anyway, I wanted to ask, can I come live with you after I finish school? I'd like to look for a summer job here, and maybe even attend college nearby if I can. Can I stay with you for weekends and holidays too? I don't think I can handle living with Mom anymore. Her deception disturbed me far more than I realized at the time. Jim's heart swelled with happiness. Of course, Emily, you're always welcome here. I'd love to have you stay with me. He truly enjoyed spending time with his daughter, and watching her grow into an independent young woman gave him immense pride. They spoke several times a week after Emily returned from spring break. She insisted that he not attend her graduation to avoid drama with Helen, but he promised to fly to Florida the next day to celebrate. On a Sunday afternoon, Jim opened the door to greet Emily, only to find Helen standing there alongside her. For a moment, he froze, unable to move or think. Felt like minutes, though it was only 10 or 15 seconds. Finally, Jim regained his composure. Come on in, Helen, he said, his voice steady. Can I get you something to drink? Thank you, Jim. That would be great, Helen replied. Jim followed them into the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of iced tea, and sat down at the table while Helen took a seat opposite him. I was planning to pick up Emily, Helen began. She told me she'll be living here with you. I've changed jobs and relocated to Daytona, so I thought we should talk about what to do with the house. You've never filed for divorce and we've never discussed it, so I don't know what you want to do. Jim was caught off guard. What motivated your decision to move here? He asked. Helen gave a small, humorless laugh. What do you think? I'm tired of freezing every winter. Emily's going to college in Florida, so there's no reason for me to stay up north. My parents and yours don't talk to me anymore, and I've disappointed pretty much everyone I know, including myself. But mostly you, she admitted, her voice cracking. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness because I know my actions were unforgivable. I'm just looking for a fresh start in a place where people won't constantly gossip about me. I'm thankful I didn't pass that gift from Frank to you. I believe you stopped being intimate with me just in time. I've realized now that everything was my fault. I tried to blame you, Frank, the cashier who infected him, hell, even the guy who delivered the letter about the STD. But it was all on me. I ruined my life and I tried to ruin yours. If you hadn't found out, you'd be dealing with that gift Frank left me. And that's something I'll never forgive myself for. Jim listened in silence, his face unreadable. Helen continued, her voice trembling. I don't even know how I justified it to myself at the time. I told myself I was entitled to a little fling, and I brought Emily into it. I'll never forgive myself for that either. I almost destroyed her relationship with you because I was selfish. I knew Frank was an ass and that it would end badly, but I didn't listen. I'm so glad you welcomed Emily back into your life. Your love and approval mean everything to her. She needs you, Jim. After the first night, Jim noticed Helen frequently seeking his company, though he remained cautious about her intentions. She had moved her clothes back into Emily's room, but made it a habit to visit him at night. During the day, they maintained a semblance of the companionship they once shared as a family. However, Jim remained guarded, mindful of the past betrayals that still loomed over their interactions. One evening, while Emily was out, Helen brought up a subject Jim had avoided. Jim, she began hesitantly, I know I've hurt you more than I can ever make up for, but being here with you and Emily again, it feels like home. I can't help but hope we might have a second chance. Jim looked at her, his expression unreadable. Helen, it's not that simple. Trust isn't something you can rebuild overnight. And honestly, I'm not sure if I can ever feel the way I used to. What happened between us changed everything. Helen nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I understand that, Jim. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, maybe not ever. But I want to try. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Jim sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's not just about trying, Helen. I need to believe in you again, and I'm not there yet. Maybe I never will be. But for Emily's sake, we can try to be civil and rebuild a foundation, if nothing else. Over the following weeks, Helen continued to stay in Emily's room, but her visits to Jim's became more frequent. She sought out ways to help around the apartment, cooking meals and taking on household tasks to show her dedication. Emily noticed the shift in her mother and occasionally commented on it. She's trying, Dad, Emily remarked one evening while they sat by the pool. I know it doesn't erase what she did, but I think she really regrets everything. She seems different. Jim shrugged. Maybe, but regret doesn't always mean change, Emily. Your mom's choices left scars, and those don't heal easily. I'll give her credit for sticking around and trying to make amends, but I'm not going to pretend everything's fine. Emily nodded thoughtfully. I get it. I just wanted to say that I think you're handling this really well. Better than I would. One night, after another intimate encounter, Helen turned to Jim in bed, her voice soft and hesitant. Jim, do you think there's any chance we could ever rebuild what we had? Even just a little? Jim lay in silence for a long moment before answering. Helen, I don't know. What we had was built on trust, and that's gone. What we're doing now, it's physical, and maybe it's part of healing for both of us. But it doesn't erase the past. Helen nodded, her face somber. I understand. I just hope that, over time, I can prove to you that I'm not the same person I was when I made those mistakes. Jim didn't respond, and the conversation lingered in the air as they both drifted into an uneasy sleep. By the end of summer, it became clear that while Helen was making efforts to mend their relationship, Jim was still conflicted. He enjoyed the moments they shared, but a part of him remained distant, unwilling to fully trust her again. Helen often repeated her vow that Jim would be the only man she'd ever be with again, but Jim only nodded, unsure if her words carried the weight of genuine change or the desperation of someone trying to salvage what they'd lost. As the season came to a close, Helen approached Jim with a more pressing question. "Jim, what's next for us? I can't stay in limbo forever. Do you see any future for us? Or do we need to finalize the divorce and move on separately?" Jim looked at her, the weight of the question pressing heavily on his mind. "I don't have an answer for you right now, Helen. I need more time to figure out what I want, and more importantly, what's best for Emily." Helen's attempts to monopolize Jim's attention became increasingly evident. She began keeping track of the condoms in his bowl, subtly trying to limit his interactions with the other women in the building. Jim, while amused, didn't call her out directly. He recognized her efforts as part of her ongoing bid to rebuild their relationship, though he wasn't entirely convinced of her motives. Helen disliked that her shift ended at 10 p.m., while Jim was home by 5 p.m. twice a week. She often returned to fresh sheets on his bed and a few condoms missing from the bowl. Her mornings were spent by the pool, where she became a familiar face among the other women. The women weren't outright mean to her, but their remarks and questions often carried a sharp edge. It was clear they all knew about her past infidelity and how it had nearly destroyed her marriage. Helen felt their judgment in every interaction, though it was rarely spoken outright. One morning, Susan Struthers approached Helen with a knowing smile. "Helen, have you chosen new blue bedding for Jim's room? It coordinates so well with the curtains and carpet," Monica Barron added with a smirk. Helen forced a tight smile. "Of course. Yes, Monica, it's a gorgeous, masculine color. And Jim is a very masculine man," she replied, her voice betraying her discomfort. That night, Helen brought it up to Jim. "You don't want these women in your bed, do you?" she asked, her tone defensive. "I'm giving you as much sex as you want. Isn't that enough for you?" Jim, reclining on the couch, raised an eyebrow. "Exactly. I'm not seeing any of them anymore," he responded plainly. Helen narrowed her eyes. "Then why are there fewer condoms in the bowl today? And how does everyone seem to know the color of your bedding?" Jim chuckled, shaking his head. "I honestly have no idea," he replied, clearly amused by her jealousy. Helen sighed, leaning back in her chair. "You're impossible sometimes." Despite the tension, Jim found himself reflecting on the situation with a sense of detachment. Each of them had encountered life-altering changes over the past year. For Helen, it was the fallout from her betrayal and the challenge of rebuilding a fractured relationship. For Jim, it was the realization that his life could, and perhaps should, take a new path. As he lay in bed that night, Helen asleep beside him, he thought about her ongoing efforts to win him back. While her actions were earnest, he couldn't shake the feeling that their dynamic had fundamentally shifted. Trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild. Jim knew one thing for certain. Life was about embracing change, finding new opportunities for growth, and remaining open to the possibilities that those changes brought. Whether Helen would be a part of his future was still uncertain, but for now, he resolved to take things one day at a time, allowing the journey to guide him.